Moving up to verse 22, we see Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's children, being described as a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. First of all, that is a fulfillment of what we read in verse 19, where Jacob declares that Manasseh should become great, Ephraim should become greater, and his seed should become a multitude of nations. In other words, Joseph's children shall become fruitful. Now in verse 22, Jacob further describes this fruitfulness and attributes it to them being by a well, and then goes on to even describe them almost coming out of this well itself by saying, a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. Run over the wall of the well, their branches. So in other words, they're almost immersed in the blessings of this well. Now remember, these children of Joseph have connections to Egypt. And then they have connections to Egypt through the priest class. In other words, the religious, ceremonial, ritualistic, mystery school ideologies of ancient Egypt. And that's going to connect us back to the very same mystery schools that were shared between Babylon, Egypt, and ancient Samaria, which ends up being a retelling of the same stories concerning the same gods, the same descriptions, but maybe just the names changed a little. But in essence, we're talking about the same thing. We're all talking about these gods of the underworld. We're talking about this abyss. We're talking about the same thing that runs perfectly parallel between the Egyptian and the Sumerian. And now what we're finding out to be within some of the records of the Hebrew Bible. So it's no accident that these half-Egyptian children of Joseph are being blessed by this very same Sumerian well known as the abyss that we saw this one Danite receiving his blessings from. So just retain that, and that we were going to look into that a little further, but that opens up an incredible amount of connections that we can do. So as we move through here to verse 23 is describing somebody not so happy with the multiplication of the fruitfulness of this Ephraim and Manasseh upon the earth. And we find out where it says, the archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. Now you can take that meaning for a long time that Ephraim and Manasseh have been grieved by archers, by people that have wanted to destroy them and bring them down and stop them from their agenda. Verse 24 describes that even though that many people have tried to bring down Ephraim and Manasseh, that they've been strengthened by this very same God of Jacob. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. So we find out now that these children, Ephraim and Manasseh, are termed the shepherds of Israel. Not only that, the stone of Israel. All the while, keep in mind that they're not full Israelite and that they are half descendant of the priestly class of Egypt. And now they are deemed as the full shepherds, the full-blown shepherds of Israel. And that this God of Jacob, this mighty God of Jacob, is giving them this extra favoritism. Well, we know where the favoritism is coming from, that they have this Egyptian heritage. Verse 25 says, even by the God of thy father who shall help thee, and by the Almighty who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. Let's look at this for a second. This very same God is now blessing them from a heaven above, but more importantly, of the deep that lieth under. Didn't we just make this connection with this well as being the blessings that were coming from this deep, which were termed the abyss? I hope that you see the connections. I'll be back.